I love it. Not that I would have a stirring deep within. The Lord is blessing this church today. Last night we saw this church serve as host of the annual participation dinner by the Christian Children's Home. A number of people came. A number of people were able to buy tickets, and you as a congregation came forward last week and really provided enough to fill those tables, and we thank you so much for that. God is blessing. And now look what you've done today. Janice and I won't have to buy any groceries soon. But no, somebody wonder what we're going to do with all of that. Well, we're fixing to give a lot of it away during Thanksgiving, and then it will carry us through for a few months, and you'd be surprised how quick it will go. We'll be coming back before very long and saying we need more. And but this is generous on your part in spite of a time when people are losing jobs and people are struggling to pay bills sometimes. And so thank you so much for your generosity. And then I look out and see a lot of seats filled this morning that haven't been filled for the last 6 weeks, and I say, where have you been? You know, if we could get everybody to come on a consistent basis, how many would we have? So I'm hoping, starting today, this is a new trend, and we're going to all be here with some regularity and see if we can't get some things really going. You may not realize it, but today begins my 7th year with this congregation. And Brother Gary Davenport's with us today, and he and I represent the preaching for the last 20 years at this church. And so I know he agrees with me that we have been blessed to be a part of it. At 9:07 p.m. on April the 13th, 1970, a message flew over the airways, and it said, "Houston, we have a problem here." This problem threatened the life of 3 men who were over 200,000 miles from home and going further away at 7 miles per second. For the next 4 days, every resource of the United States would be marshaled to rescue the 3 men of Apollo 13. James Lovell, Fred Hayes, Jack Swigert were on their way to becoming the 3rd team of men to set their foot on the moon. But there was an explosion 10 feet behind their seats that wiped out most of their air, their electricity, their water, and the rest of it was flying out into outer space. How would you like to realize that most of your supply of breathable air was gone, and the next supply was at least 200,000 miles away? To stay alive, you would have to travel 300,000 miles to get back home. Under those conditions, do you think it would be possible to keep up your hope? Most of us would ignore such a story because we cannot consider our lives to have any familiarity with that. And of course, we're not 200 and something thousand miles away in space. But think again about the story. Until the explosion, the men in Apollo 13 had absolutely no sense of danger. The data and the computers said that everything was okay. And I think that sometimes we likewise may be sailing along comfortably in our life with no sense of impending danger. But just because things are going smooth right now does not mean that we will always be secure. Just how far away are you this morning from your children's life unraveling in front of your eyes, or your job disappearing, or your spouse announcing that they want a divorce? Indeed, your life may be on the brink of disaster at any moment. who knows what will happen before we come together again on Wednesday night. You know, you could be dead and buried between now and Wednesday night. The Apollo Command Module had 1 million different systems. It required hundreds of people on the ground to monitor them. Mission Control had put together the very best scientific minds in our nation to solve all of the highly technical problems of survival. And I'm sure the crew of Apollo 13 had some hope because the finest minds were slavishly working in their behalf. If they could find hope in the total support that the nation was giving to bringing them back home in our darkest hours, can we not depend upon the Creator, the Designer, and the Sustainer of all of our lives? When we likewise encounter danger on our life journey, when our mission meets tragedy and our homecoming is in doubt, folks, we need to call upon the only one who can bring us home. I direct your attention to Romans chapter 8 at verse 3 through 4, where Paul reminds us who's in charge of our spiritual mission control. Jesus Christ is more than qualified, folks, to sit where the PhDs and the experts sat in mission control. He is our only source of hope. He is our only source of comfort. The Scripture reads, "For what the law could not do, weak as it was through the flesh, God did, sending His own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh. And as an offering for sin, He condemned sin in the flesh, so that the requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit." You see, Paul begins this chapter of Romans by introducing the law as a possible solution to the problems that we encounter on life's perilous journey. Exactly what did the law encompass? The law that the young Rabbi Saul, to become Paul, talked about most was more than just the 10 Commandments. In fact, the Jews spoke of the first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, as the law. And when a rabbi pronounced these judgments and law about the law's message to man, he would have also studied the history books, the poetry books, and the major and minor prophets. In fact, all of the Old Testament books consisted and constituted the law to a Jew. And for many years prior to Jesus and Paul, there was another group of things called the Talmud. It was uninspired, but the Talmud had also began to have as much authority as what we call the law of God as it is in the Old Testament. The law served to guide and inform the people of God on every aspect of life from birth to death. And it would be a mistake to think, when Paul says what the law could not do, that somehow the law of God was powerless. I am convinced that if we as a nation would build our lives on complete obedience to the 10 Commandments, we could wipe out all crime, all murder, all selfishness and greed and adultery and divorce and dishonesty. If we had nothing but the 10 Commandments, we could build a civilized society. The law did indeed have power, but Paul spoke of something that the law could not do. And what Jesus Christ did makes all other things pale in comparison, as if to say that the law accomplished nothing. But the law had power as far as it went. Paul would say in Romans chapter 7 at verse 7, What shall we say then? Is the law sin? May it never be. On the contrary, he said, I would not have come to know sin except through the law. And he would say that the law said, don't covet. And it dawned on him that he was a person who was coveting. And in chapter 7 at verse 12, Paul would say then, the law is holy, and the commandment is holy and righteous and good. But Paul clearly believed it was not the law of God that failed, but it was the sinful men and women who tried to carry out the law who failed. You see, the law of God, as given in the Old Testament, was not designed to overcome sin, but its job was to reveal sin. You would read the law and you'd say, oh my, I'm guilty. I'm doing what that says don't do. And sin would be revealed to your person, and you would become aware that you were not keeping the law of God. Those who tried to obey the law never could apply it consistently enough for it to be effective. Its design's purpose was to reveal sin for what it was and help us to realize that it is impossible to perfectly keep God's law apart from His grace. As great as the law was, as powerful as it was, there was something it could not do. And the Son of God, sent to this earth by Jesus, was greater. The Son of God could do what the law could not do. Jesus Christ did what the law was never designed to do, to overcome sin. Jesus condemned the sin that condemns us. We were helpless and we were hopeless. But Christ gave us hope. Just like those astronauts so far from home. Hopeless in the way men look at things. But there was hope that somebody on the ground would help them get there. And we're helpless and hopeless today. And we're hoping that there's somebody there that will help us get through, and we know that we are. Can you imagine that the Apostle Paul on the Damascus road, he was going to Damascus to persecute Christians, and when he was later in the Arabian desert by himself trying to work through all of the law of God and Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit and all of that, he did not know what to think about it. And what he was realizing for the first time on the road to Damascus and when he was in the Arabian desert was that he had devoted his whole life to a law that could not do anything for him in the final analysis. It could not save him. It could not deliver him because he could not keep it. And he was in a hopeless condition. He was miles from home and no way to get back. Now, there is another law that produces the same end result as the gospel of the law. I'm talking about the gospel of self-reliance. Americans for many generations have been taught this law. You know, nobody gives you a free lunch. Nobody gives you something for nothing. You get what you pay for. You got to pull your own weight. If you want something done, do it yourself. Anything worth having is worth working for. Hard work is its only reward. Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. A hard-working man is his own best friend. Never trust a man with soft hands. Be your own man. God helps those who helps themselves. I think that last one, this present generation, would do well to practice a little more. But having said that, we need to understand that beans and potatoes don't walk onto your plate. Milk doesn't come from cartons. It comes from stupid, smelly, ornery critters that have to be milked by somebody every day, early in the morning, rain or shine. Self-reliance is important, but even self-reliance has its limits. There are things that happen that we cannot anticipate, control, or manipulate. Self-reliance can go only so far. And all of us have seen our hands tied, and we have watched our lives spin out of control, and all of the efforts that we make, all the hard work we do cannot put it back in line like we think it ought to be. Self-reliance cannot give us hope when we are hopeless and helpless. Self-reliance can never get you home with God. To think that I can depend on me. How foolish to depend on yourself. We find that we cannot, by self-reliance, do any better than the Jews trying to keep the law. We cannot keep the righteous requirements of the law by our own self-strength. What a joy it is to learn that through faith, the Spirit of God enables us, through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, His Son, to fulfill the spirit of the law. But there is a third. It is the gospel of the substitute. The story is told about two identical brothers growing up on the streets of Brooklyn, New York at the turn of the century. They grew in the home of a hard-working but impoverished immigrant parents. They had clothes and shoes and food, but they were basically unaware of their poverty. As the boys grew older, they took different paths. One of them took up the priesthood, having been obedient all his life to his parents. The other boy found that the other world was too hard to resist. He wanted the wealthy lifestyle, and he was willing to do whatever it was necessary to get it. He finally ended up killing a man in cold blood because of money. And the evidence about the situation was evident to the jury and the judge sentenced him to the gas chamber for his murder. The day of his execution, a priest came to the prison to see him. It was his brother, his identical twin brother. His brother came and told him that I want to change clothes with you and I want you to go free. His only request was that you wear the garments that I'm giving you worthily. And so he agreed. He was too selfish to think otherwise. Hey, I can get out of this. And he walked out of the prison free, and no one knew the difference. And he watched his own brother die in his place. And that being the case, he was never free from that scene again. It changed his life. You can guess the rest of the story. He ended up doing his brother's work. But I want you to notice with me Hebrews chapter 6, verse 19 and 20. We've been talking about being in a hopeless situation, helpless, unable to get home. The writer of Hebrews says, this hope we have as an anchor of the soul. A hope both sure, steadfast, and one which enters within the veil where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us. Our twin brother has entered the veil as a forerunner for us, having become a high priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. But look at chapter 4. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. Therefore, let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Listen to that. Let us draw near with confidence. Hope in a hopeless situation. The law of God cannot be kept perfectly, and our self-reliance will not do the job, but we do have a substitute. Jesus Christ, the righteous, the high priest, gone to heaven because He entered the veil of death for us, and so we can draw near with confidence this morning. Jesus Christ did what the law could not do. Jesus Christ did what reliance cannot do. He became our substitute. He was tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. And we can draw near with confidence. We can find mercy and grace to help in time of need. For 4 difficult and lonely days, the Apollo 13 crew struggled to get back home. They were hurtling toward Earth at 24,000 miles per hour, and at re-entry, all radio contact was lost, and for 3 long, agonizing minutes, we had to wait. You young people, you weren't even alive when that happened. And if you could just known how the country felt. For 3 minutes, everybody looking at the sky, hoping to see the parachutes. And then when the parachutes were spotted, pandemonium broke out. Everybody celebrated. They were back home. I think of Luke 15. Man had 2 sons. The younger of them said, "Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me." So he divided his wealth between them. And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything, went on a journey to a distant country, and there he squandered his estate with loose living. And you know the story. He ended up feeding hogs and eating what the hogs ate. That's the mess he got himself in. Hopeless. A good Jewish boy eating where the pigs eat. Things don't look too good. He wanted to go home. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, and I'm dying here with hunger? I'll get up and go to my father and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men.' So he got up and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to the father, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to the slaves, 'Quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf, kill it, let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and he has been found.' And they began to celebrate." So it is this morning. You can't keep the law perfectly. You can't keep all the rules. You can't keep all the commands. Doesn't mean you shouldn't make an effort. But you come to the conclusion, I'm not going to make it because I am a sinner. And you realize for the first time in your life, I can't count on me. Self-reliance is not the way. And then you remember, I've got a substitute. The Son of God who did it for me. Thank you, Lord. Now I've got some hope. Now I've got some confidence. And so this morning, if you're a part of this audience and you do not have that assurance that you have Jesus as your substitute working on your behalf, sacrificing on your behalf, you can do something about that. You don't have to be like the Apollo astronauts away from home and no way to get back and hopeless and helpless. You can do something about it. You can be a Christian and be saved and have confidence and hope, and you can do it right now. While together we stand and sing, would you come?